to the Mitchell Center for Sustainability Solutions and our Sustainability Talks series. My name is David Hart, and I'm the director of the Mitchell Center. It's great. So I'd now like to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Sharon Klein. Sharon is an associate professor in the School of Economics and also a faculty member in the Mitchell Center. Sharon often refers to herself as an interdisciplinary energy researcher, which is her way of saying that you have to be able to look at energy issues from a lot of different angles. As just one example, we can't begin to solve the climate change challenge unless we transform our energy systems, but energy systems have a lot of moving parts. And some of the most important decisions about our energy future are made by individuals, households, and communities. Sharon has conducted research on many different energy technologies, including hydropower and biofuels. And as you'll see, she's particularly passionate about solar energy and how to make it work for Maine communities. So take it away, Sharon.
Thank you, David. Just give me a moment to share my screen. All right, excellent. So welcome everybody. I'm really excited to see all of you here today and to talk about one of my favorite subjects, community solar. Before we get started, however, I wanted to give you a heads up that after my presentation, there will be a brief 5-minute question and answer where you will put your questions in the chat, as David mentioned. And feel free to put them in there as you think of them. You don't, from my perspective, you don't have to wait until the end. And then we are going to go after kind of a quick 5-minute Q&A. We're going to go into breakout rooms for about 10 minutes, where some of my undergraduate and graduate students from my classes will lead you through a discussion about some of the content of my presentation. The questions and discussion will be centered on the question in the title of this presentation: is community solar good for communities? Spoiler alert, as you can imagine, the answer to this question is going to be, it depends. In my presentation, I'm going to lay out some of the different factors and situations that contribute to a yes answer, and some challenges that may need to be overcome in getting to a yes answer. In your breakout groups, you will discuss these factors, situations, and challenges, and try to identify when and under what context community solar may be good for your community, and when it may not be. So to start to answer this question, first, we need a shared understanding of what is community solar. Before I really start to get into that, I wanted to get a sense of your perceptions of community solar. So please take a moment and just add a few words to the chat. I know the chat's going to get a little crazy as everybody adds stuff in, but I'd really like to kind of just look through and see some of the themes that emerge in terms of how you would answer this question. What is community solar? So I'm just going to mute myself for a moment while I allow you, a little bit of time to add some stuff to the chat. All right, and some good answers are coming in here. You all can see them because they're sent to everybody, but I'm just picking up, a few varied responses: municipal solar projects, consumer owned, not corporate owned, sharing energy, less dependence on fossil fuels, a major role. The community has a major role in siting and planning. So there's a lot of different perspectives on this, and we're going to talk about that right now. So let me get out of chat for a sec and come back over here. So often the phrase community solar naturally brings to mind images associated with the word community. You can see here in this word cloud: people, change, school, help, need, see, service, better, families, etc. For some, the term conjures an image of the physical space of their community, where they may picture a solar array sitting prominently among the space. Some people will picture people in the community working together to install or purchase the solar array or make the project happen in some way. Many people think of community solar as a kind of barn raising event with a lot of involvement by a lot of people and a celebration for a job well done. We can turn to academic literature for a definition. Community solar is a type of community energy, which is typically renewable energy or energy efficiency adoption in a way that the energy or energy savings have financial and or other benefits for a group of people, not just an individual. Often this group is united by geography, so in the same town or neighborhood. They might have a similar set of interests, and at least some, if not all, of the costs and or benefits are shared by the group. The government also helps us with a definition. Under the heading Community Solar, the United States Department of Energy, or DOE, identifies 4 main approaches. Individuals joining forces to get a lower installation price through a group purchasing event known as the Solarize campaign. Individuals buying into a shared solar array on a multi-unit building like a condo or apartment building. Individuals or a community buying into a shared solar array on a property that is off-site and may or may not be their own. And individuals, companies, and or nonprofit organizations helping to fund solar on a church, library, school, or other community-centered property. The National Community Solar Partnership, or NCSP, was originally founded in 2015 as a collaboration between the United States Departments of Energy, Agriculture, Housing, and Urban Development, and the United States Environmental Protection Agency, with a goal to make community solar accessible to all Americans, with a specific focus on low to moderate income Americans. The partnership was initially only designed to be 1 year, but in 2020, a new version of the partnership began again, this time largely under the leadership of one of the DOE's national labs, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, or NREL. I've been an active member of this partnership since 2015, and again this past year as one of few academic representatives. Most members are from nonprofit, private industry, or government. The National Community Solar Partnership primarily focuses on a type of community solar typically referred to as a shared solar farm, a type of off-site solar from the previous DOE pictures that I showed, where there is a large array of solar panels, larger than what you might put on your own property, but smaller than a utility scale solar power plant. There are participants who pay for a share of the solar farm. The participants get credits on their electric bill for their share of the generated electricity. It sounds somewhat simple, but it turns out there are about a zillion ways you can go about this from a practical standpoint, and several things you need to have in place in order to do it. One policy that's required for this type of community solar to work is something called virtual net metering. To understand that, it's helpful to understand regular net metering first. If your state has a net metering policy, which Maine does, and you put solar panels on your house or property, your panels are going to generate electricity during the daytime and not at night. But you will still be using electricity at night, and sometimes during the day. You won't be using as much electricity as your panels generate. Net metering allows you to send that solar electricity that you didn't use in your house to the grid so others can use it. In return, you get a credit on your electric bill for the electricity you sent to the grid. Plus, you don't pay for the electricity from your solar panels that you used in your house. You do pay for the electricity you pulled from the grid when the sun wasn't shining. Net metering is both a technological and administrative system. Technological because you need a meter that can count both ways, electricity coming into and leaving your house. Administrative because someone at your utility or electricity distribution company has to keep track of those kilowatt hours going both ways and bill you appropriately. Most state net metering policies allow you to size your solar array so you can achieve up to a net zero cost bill over the course of a year, rolling over credits during months of a lot of solar energy generation and using them during times when you don't have as much sun. In addition to regular net metering, which can be applied to an individual with solar on their roof, community solar requires virtual and community net metering policies, which allow credits to be applied even when the solar array is not on the individual's property, and allows multiple accounts to be linked to one solar array. There are also different people involved in a community solar array. So first you have the host, the person or entity that owns the property where the solar array will be installed. The host could be a private company or individual that buys land that is already wide open or clears land to make room for a ground-mounted array like you see here. Or the host could be a community building, a church, a library, a school, or other nonprofit or for-profit property in the community that has space on a roof or in a parking lot or on a landfill for a solar array. Next, we have the solar owner. Who is actually going to own the solar panels? This can change over time. It could be one person or entity to start with, and then ownership could transfer to another person or entity. The owner could be a utility, but not here in Maine because our utilities are not allowed to own power generation due to deregulation. The owner could be a private company, often called a developer, a nonprofit organization, or a person or group of people who form a limited liability company or LLC. There are many different options and arrangements for the owner. Then you have the subscribers. This can get tricky too. Subscribers might own or lease the panels. Their level of involvement, attachment, understanding, and awareness of the solar farm may vary depending on how the farm is structured. From the subscriber perspective, the experience might be like a community supported agriculture or CSA farm share, or a community garden where you feel deeply connected to the project. You can see and visit the project and point to some section of the panels and say, those are mine. Or the experience might be impersonal, just a different energy bill with a different amount with savings, so you're feeling happier about it, but ultimately you continue to turn on the lights without really thinking about where the energy is coming from. The experience largely depends on whether the community solar approach is bottom up or top down. Bottom up community solar approaches are often termed grassroots, while you may hear top down approaches called developer-led or utility-led. Up until recently, Maine has had an exclusively bottom-up community solar industry, largely spearheaded by a single solar installer, Revision Energy, and more or less made active by the will of the people in a relatively unfriendly policy environment. From the time community solar started in Maine in 2015 until the new solar legislation was signed in 2019, there was a cap on the number of meters that could be involved in a single community solar farm. The 10-meter cap actually meant that only 9 people could participate in a shared solar farm because there had to be 1 meter for the solar array itself. Despite this cap, interested Edgecombe community members contracted with Revision Energy to build the first community solar farm in Maine in 2015. Between 2015 and 2019, 10 more projects that I know of anyway, there could be more, were installed in Maine. To my knowledge, most or all of them were installed by Revision, and they were all relatively small, around 20 to 100 kilowatts in power capacity each, because they had to be small due to the 10-meter limit. In July of 2019, Governor Mills signed into law a new solar bill that included several changes for Maine's solar industry, one of which was to remove the 10-meter solar cap and instead institute a cap based on the power capacity of the project, so 5 megawatts per project, around 50 times bigger than Maine's largest community solar farm at the time. The new law also implemented a statewide target of 250 megawatts of new community solar procurement over 5 years, or about 300 times the power capacity of existing community solar in the state at the time. This new legislation not only opened the door for Revision and other existing Maine-based solar companies to expand or start their community solar programs, but it also opened the door for larger community solar developers who had been building and operating projects in other states to come into Maine and implement new projects. The new legislation essentially opened the door for top-down community solar in Maine. So let's take a look at the differences between these two main approaches. Grassroots community solar typically starts with a group of people or a local installer. For example, my understanding of the projects that were installed during the time period of the 10-meter cap was that they were started by community members approaching installers to see if they could do this type of project, rather than the other way around. Now that the cap has been lifted, Revision's website at least indicates the company is taking on more of a developer role in leasing land and recruiting participants for new community solar farms, but while trying to maintain a commitment to local grassroots involvement and what they call true ownership. We'll get into that in a minute. Before the cap was lifted, this meant that participants in a shared solar array had varying experience and knowledge of solar and had to figure it all out on the way. In many cases, learning from scratch about the technology, regulations, and policies. I remember attending a Portland climate action meeting a few years ago when they were considering a community solar farm. The process was slow and involved many meetings, educational seminars, group learning, running into roadblocks related to transmission and distribution wires, existing electricity access, etc. The group had to navigate that all themselves and ended up consulting with experts to help them navigate it. Essentially, the people who wanted to share this solar array were doing all of the planning, figuring out who would host it and where, who would have shares in it, what size the project would be, when it would be installed, and how. The participants also share the installation costs. They may or may not pay enough in taxes to receive the federal tax credit of 26% off the installation cost of the array. If they don't, they may seek what is called third-party financing or form a limited liability company or LLC in order to take advantage of the tax credit that way and make the upfront cost more affordable to the participants. There are many potential benefits from a grassroots approach. First, it usually targets a specific community and people who either know each other or meet each other in the community as part of the process of developing the project. However, the larger the project, the less likely everyone gets to know each other, even if it is a grassroots project. The participants have control over the project because they develop it and they own it. They can be creative with this control. Maybe choose to site the project on a closed landfill or other brownfield to reclaim unused land. Maybe site it on a school or library and integrate it with a community or school education plan. Maybe pair the solar array with battery storage or something else. They may feel a sense of pride in accomplishing the project from the ground up. People are more likely to trust the process and project if they know who is involved and are engaged in the work themselves. If it truly is a community effort, that can contribute to resilience in the community to band together to solve other problems. To the extent that all members of the community can and are invited to participate in the project, there can be equitable access to solar energy. However, this gets a little tricky in grassroots community solar because by the nature of the shared ownership, which includes sharing the upfront costs, equitable access is not guaranteed and can be difficult to offer. There are ways the upfront costs can be financed and shared differently to provide equal access for people of lower income, but the approach has to be deliberate and its success is not guaranteed. A grassroots project can inspire a sense of independence, whether real or perceived. This kind of relates to pride, feeling good about generating your own energy. The project can support local jobs by hiring a local installer and also hiring people in the community to manage the long-term management of the project as necessary. The project can contribute to local economic development, especially to the extent that energy savings from the project are experienced by community-serving institutions like municipal government, local businesses or nonprofit organizations, schools, etc. The project can be cited visibly within the community to showcase renewable energy. And combined with some targeted education programming could improve energy literacy in the community, deepen awareness and understanding of energy issues and solutions. Grassroots community solar also leads to long-term financial benefits, which can be measured by something called net present value, which accounts for the upfront costs, any annual costs, and annual energy savings over the lifetime of the project, and includes a factor that accounts for the time value of money, or the idea that people in general want benefits now and costs later. Also, the grassroots approach may involve people owning their share of the panels, not leasing them, or having a lease structure that involves a long-term commitment that is pretty close to true ownership. Depending on the nature of the project, the co-owners may retain the renewable energy credits, or RECs, essentially the environmental and social value of the project. Since RECs can be bought and sold, some people consider a project more environmentally conscious if the RECs are held and never sold. But as far as I know, even the true ownership model Revision employs now still sells the RECs and includes a long-term lease that can be renewed for 5 to 10 years after the 25-year project lifetime. Not technically lifetime ownership, but pretty darn close. There are substantial costs to this approach as well. Most prominently is the upfront financial cost. If all participants are sharing this cost, that means each participant has to pay around $10,000 to be involved. There is also a time cost. Depending on the expertise of the core group planning the project, this could be significant. The group of owner participants is also taking on all of the risk of the project, including risks of running into a state or local regulation they didn't know about that could stall or prevent the project after money has already been paid, the risk of the host deciding to sell their land partway through the project lifetime, or one of the other participants moving from the area, the risk of the panels being damaged, etc. Again, there could be local, state, or utility regulations or barriers that the group will have to navigate and may not have the legal expertise or knowledge, technical knowledge, to fully understand. There is, of course, opportunity cost involved in any investment. What else could you have done with the money or time, and what benefit could that next best investment have brought you? And as mentioned before, the equity piece is tricky. If you have to pay to play, that precludes low-income involvement and can perpetuate the feeling by many that solar is only for the rich. However, people, businesses, nonprofit organizations, and governments are coming up with new ways of financing solar all the time that could make it possible for low-income people to participate in a grassroots, true ownership community solar model. But the group would have to be dedicated to that goal and explicitly putting measures in place to make that happen. Developer-led community solar, on the other hand, typically starts with an experienced for-profit company, which could be a B corporation like Revision, with a stated commitment to social sustainability at the heart of their business plan. The developer identifies the size of the array and the land it will be on. They identify the project host. The developer will typically contract with another company to recruit and manage subscribers, people who they want to sign up to be a member. Typically, the subscribers are allowed to cancel their subscription anytime for no fee, and then transfer their subscription if they move within the same utility territory. Due to this situation, the subscriber pool will likely change over time. The developer typically has deep knowledge of local and state regulations because they make it their business to know those things. The developer pays the upfront cost and takes the tax credit, or may bring in third-party investors who pay the upfront costs and take the tax credit. The developer offers a subscription price that is higher than the developer's cost of doing business, so they can make a profit, but lower than the prevailing price of delivered residential electricity. In that way, the project is a good financial deal for the developer, and they pass some of that profit or savings onto the subscribers. So it's a good financial deal for the subscribers who see immediate savings and no or low upfront cost. From the subscriber's perspective, they sign a contract, and once the developer has enough subscribers and the project is up and running, the subscriber starts to receive 2 electricity-related bills instead of the one they previously received. They get their usual electricity bill from their electricity provider, like Versant Power or CMP, which is lower than it usually is because it includes the virtually net metered credits for the energy from their portion of the solar array. Plus, they get a separate bill from the community solar developer, which charges them a subscription price for their share of the solar array. The difference between the two bills, the credit or net positive cash flow on the electric bill minus the subscription cost on the community solar bill, is a net benefit or savings of around 10 to 15%. There are several benefits to this approach. First, it is typically more time and cost effective because developers often have access to land and capital to allow for bigger projects that can be built quickly. And they usually have the experience to get it done quickly and at a lower cost than a group of neighbors trying to learn as they go how to develop a project together. These efficiencies can often lead to lower upfront costs. The developer often has more access to cheaper capital and more flexibility in the way the project can be financed and the tax credit incorporated. They can use those advantages to offer immediate savings to the subscribers and at no or low net cost to them relative to what they are currently paying for electricity, especially in Maine where we have high electricity prices compared to other states. There's more flexibility and less risk for the subscriber who can cancel the contract at any time or transfer it to another account. All in all, the process is very convenient for the subscriber who just signs a contract and starts saving money. All of that contributes in theory to equitable access, especially for low-income people. However, in practice, it has been challenging for developers to recruit low-income participants for many reasons. Top-down projects can also lead to local jobs, especially if companies have a strong commitment to hiring local people to install the panels and recruit and manage the subscribers. For example, I'm on the board of directors for a Maine-grown nonprofit organization called Window Dressers, and we learned recently that one of our longtime volunteers got a job helping recruit customers for the company Power Market, which is not headquartered in Maine, but is dedicated to hiring Mainers to help with their community solar projects in Belfast, China, and Baldwin. There are disadvantages to the top-down approach as well. First, the actual solar array may be far away or not visible from the community, or more aptly, communities the project serves, because the project serves the entire utility or electricity supply territory. So all of the people in the Versant territory, or all of the people in the CMP territory, for example. This characteristic can make people feel disconnected from the project. So it's not much different than the way people have interacted with electricity for more than 100 years. Just flip a switch and you don't really have to think about where the electricity is coming from, which makes the project not tied to a sense of community, pride, or independence, and doesn't really have a lot to do with what people think of when they use the word community. This disconnection reduces the opportunity for community engagement, resilience, education, and creativity that can come with grassroots projects. There are also some serious trust issues with developer-led community solar in Maine, partially because companies are coming in from out of state and potentially buying up land. Mainers tend to frown on people from away doing this type of thing, but also because not too long ago, there was an actual scam about 3 years ago when a company called Electricity Maine went door to door and passed out flyers claiming easy electricity savings. And Mainers got, well, kind of messed up from it, ending up with higher rates over time. Some are concerned that these larger projects may clear forest land and make room for larger solar arrays, or may compete with farmland. You can see behind me, I chose a picture of solar from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, which actually demonstrates something called agrivoltaics, which is taking hold a lot in Massachusetts. This is actually a picture of a solar farm in Massachusetts where there's a big push to try to make solar work well with farmland. So that's an example behind me. So this graphic summarizes the main difference between many typical grassroots and developer-led community solar approaches. Grassroots tend to focus more on long-term ownership or a lease that is as close to ownership as you can get, while developer-led community solar is pay-as-you-go or subscription-based. There are blurred lines between these two generalizations, though. A grassroots project could, for example, elect to hire a developer and make a portion of their project subscription-based to provide more access to low income, or use the developer's connections and access to capital to do a third-party ownership structure that returns ownership to the community group after the tax credit benefit has been realized by the developer or other financier. On the other hand, a developer could take a grassroots approach to recruiting participants and a host to a truly community-led and community-based project. So rather than trying to depict this choice as black and white, I highlight it to show you some of the variety of approaches that are out there. Specific to Maine, we are seeing one example of subscription-based community solar in the Bangor Old Town area from a company called Nexamp that is based in Massachusetts, I think. And here is their advertisement targeting individuals to sign up and start receiving immediate savings. Revision, on the other hand, a Maine-based company that also serves New Hampshire, advertises their, quote, true ownership community solar option, for which you pay a lot up front or get a loan like you would for if you put panels on your own house and owned them. But they're on someone else's property in a solar farm. And over time, your savings outweigh what you paid and you start to essentially make money, or in reality, not really make money, but save so much that your electric bill gets close to zero for about 15 years. The amount of money you save each year with a true ownership model is a lot more than the 15% savings you get with the subscription option, but you have to pay off your investment essentially before you start netting those higher savings. I recently published an article in the journal Solar Energy that crunches these numbers to see whether the true ownership or subscription-based model was a better financial deal. I used a model that had been developed by an organization in Illinois to compare the financials of several case study community solar projects they had identified and done technical and financial analysis on. I updated information that had been collected in 2016 and compared their results to 4 possibilities for a community solar project in Maine on Mount Desert Island. You can see the Maine results here in the yellow shaded section. I calculated the net present value over a 25-year lifetime for the project host, owner, and subscriber. You can see that for different cases, the owner varied. Sometimes the host was the owner, like in this owner-host icon up here. Sometimes the owner-host was a for-profit entity, and sometimes it was a tax-exempt or nonprofit organization. Sometimes the owner was also the host and the subscriber, in the cases of true ownership as I modeled it. This case, number 30, shows the results for the true ownership approach in which all participants, including the subscribers and hosts, are all owners, the way all Maine projects used to be before the 2019 legislation. You can't see the red owner subscriber icon up here because it's hidden behind this grayish subscriber box. These modeled results show the host and actually the non-host subscribers with a lower NPV than in the other Maine cases because the owner participants have to do everything themselves. However, case study 29, this one right here, and the next option over, this next option over, shows a panel purchase approach in which there is a developer who manages the project and the participants still own the panels. They purchase them from the developer who serves in a central project manager role, much like what I understand revision has shifted to after 2019. We can compare that to number 27, which is more representative of the Nexamp model, developer-led and subscription-based. And then number 28 is a hybrid between the subscription-based approach of 27 and the panel purchase with developer support of 29. One key takeaway here is that all 4 approaches yield positive net present value at an 8% developer and 10% subscriber discount rate, showing that they're all good investments. But note that 27, the developer-led, has a higher NPV for the developer, and lower NPV for the host compared to the other two that are here that involve a developer. However, the panel purchase with developer support model number 29 yields the highest host NPV and lowest developer NPV. This graph zooms in on the non-host subscribers. Here, you can see the owner subscriber now in the true ownership case. The subsidized subscribers up here include a 50% subsidy for low-income participants, which is part of Illinois' current legislation, but not part of Maine's. And those subsidized subscribers do better with the subscription-based approach, like Nexamp is doing, while the unsubsidized subscribers do very slightly better with the panel purchase approach, kind of like what Revision appears to be offering. But the differences are so small that given model uncertainty, they're essentially the same. Either way, according to the model, all four approaches yield a positive net present value for both subscriber types. Illinois is a good state to watch because there are several steps ahead of us in community solar deployment. They're also an electricity restructured state like we are, where the utility can't own generation, and they have a very comprehensive set of community solar laws. My article also provides a detailed comparison between Illinois and Maine community solar laws, both before and after major new changes. Here for Maine, you can see the 11 mainly installer or citizen-led projects before the 2019 legislation came into effect. This number of 29 projects reflects the 11 existing from over here, plus shared distributed generation projects, which are mostly solar, for which applications achieved bid offer status in Block 1 of the Maine Public Utilities Commission shared distributed generation procurement, which was part of the new legislation in 2019. The PUC ultimately deemed the procurement non-competitive, and so it didn't proceed. But this is the number of projects at the time that seemed likely to be built, and they appear to be mostly developer-led. Illinois used to have mostly rural electric cooperative projects, and now most projects are developer-led. You can see that Illinois has a higher REC price range than what was experienced in Maine before the new legislation determined the REC price would be determined through competitive bidding. But Illinois also has lower electricity prices than we do and has energy-only net metering, whereas our net metering policy compensates solar owners for delivery as well. Illinois has a higher LMI percentage, the percentage of low to moderate income participation. In fact, it has a very comprehensive set of rules, recommendations, and expectations related to LMI inclusion, which on the surface appears that it would lead to more equitable access for these groups. However, in practice, many projects are having a hard time meeting their LMI quotas. Part of that issue could be explained by a concept known as energy efficiency gap, a widely researched subject that seeks to understand why people do not adopt energy efficiency and renewable energy when it is more economically beneficial to do so. The energy efficiency gap highlights the discord between information, knowledge, and action, and all of the social barriers in between. It also suggests that our attempts to recruit people to these solutions in the past may need some rethinking. Historical attempts to encourage people to change have focused on providing individuals with information. It turns out that approach has many flaws, including barriers to reaching all people with information in a language they can understand, and then having them actually understand the information in the way that it was intended, not to mention motivating them to act on it. Financial incentives have been used as a way to motivate people to act, either as a carrot, a reward or subsidy, or a stick, paying a tax or fine. But often people don't trust or understand the financial incentives, or will only adopt the new behavior while the financial incentive is in place, and then will drop it when the incentive is removed. More recently, people have been more deliberate in trying, oops, sorry, my word just stopped for a second. Let me get back. And actually, now that I'm taking a look at the time, I may just speed ahead to the very end, which is that given all of this, which I was pretty close to the end, but the technical difficulty kind of cut a little bit of it off. We have a lot of community solar growing across the country. And here in Maine, especially, we're kind of on the cusp of a big change between the way that community solar used to be done and the way community solar is now being done. And so it is time for people to really start to think about which community solar approach is right for their community and for their region, and how we can kind of access those benefits that we see in different approaches for community solar. So I'm going to show you thank the funding sources that have helped me over the years with the work that has contributed toward this. And in a moment, we're going to be doing some quick breakout rooms, but I did want to just take a moment to take a few questions if that works for Linda.
Sure. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. So what's exciting is that people are putting so many comments in the chat, so much information there that we all need to learn. Not so many questions yet, but lots and lots of ideas and resources for all of us to think about. So maybe we should go ahead with the breakouts, and then we'll come back to questions. And if people have a little bit of time, do read just the wealth of information that's there.
All right, excellent. Oh, and I do, as I'm going to copy and paste into the chat a Google Doc so that all of the participants have access to the breakout room questions. And I might have to do that. Wait a second. I did know how to do this. There's the chat. Okay, I got the chat now. All right, so there is a Google Doc link for the questions that we're going to be talking about in the breakout rooms. You will have facilitators as well, students of mine who've volunteered to do this, and they have access to this document as well, and will be helping to facilitate the conversation and to take some notes that they can share back with the larger group. I am going to warn you, I do this to my classes all the time, but I'm going to kind of float through the groups and try to get little bits and pieces of what's being talked about. So you may just see my face appear. So I don't want to startle you, but that may be what's happening. And I'm just kind of there to listen to what different people are talking about. So I guess Carol is going to put you all into breakout rooms. Thank you for the discussion. I got to hear bits and pieces of it, but we are at 4 o'clock. So obviously anybody who needs to leave, feel free to do so. If you can stick around for a couple minutes, the students are going to report back what they heard in the breakout rooms. And I would love to stick around for any questions that people have. So thank you again. So maybe we can start with Lam. Would you mind reporting out what happened in your group?
But in my breakout room, we mostly discussed getting as many options as possible for on and off the grid, and maximizing grid value through locations, and just about how all financial and social and environmental aspects are all extremely important for our communities. And yeah, that's basically it.
Thank you, Lam. Wonderful. It sounds like you guys had a good discussion. Cam, what did you guys talk about?
So our discussion kind of centered around the different viewpoints on top down and bottom up, and what value there is in a grassroots approach versus the challenges that come with it. And we had John Luft and Dave Feldman both made really good points. The points that Dave made were that projects are getting really complex, that the grassroots models are getting difficult to pursue, but at the same time, grassroots is a model that really comes from the community and has a lot of power in it. And then Dave also responded and reiterated the fact that grassroots can also ask a lot of communities. So I think the consensus landed in sort of a middle ground where there's challenges to both approaches, and it likely looks different based on the community. So ultimately, the group was in agreement that there needs to, it's a starting point, community solar is for transforming the grid, and that was what was said by Terrence, because community solar has the opportunity to be so much, and it's about figuring out what it's going to look like from a practical standpoint.
Great, thank you, Cam. How about Quinn?
Thank you. So we talked a lot about how community solar is driven by economics and how we need these economic incentives, especially for lower income community who may not have the incentive to spend money on a new type of energy. We talked about the difference between municipal and capital funds and what would be better for this and giving incentives. We also talked about how it's important to quickly and widely install solar energy and the problems that may encounter, such as houses not having the infrastructure for solar panel energy. And finally, about how on-site battery backup is important for like if power lines go down during like a big snowstorm, and how that could be very game-changing for people who can have that energy during a storm.
Great, thank you, Quinn. Macy.
Thank you. So in my breakout group, a lot of the members are starting to think about solar energy themselves. So how to get involved, how to really just how to get started. And they had a lot of really great questions, and I'll pass them off to you. Mostly it came down to they need a lot of questions answered to move forward with it. And there's just a lot of confusion about different aspects.
Great, thank you, Macy. I mean, not great that there's confusion, but great summary. Samantha.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, first off, thanks to everybody in my breakout room. I could probably learn a lot from everybody that was in there. They seem very passionate about trying to find solar energy, ways to get it to low income families if they were to go with community solar. And overall, there was favors towards both grassroots and top down, and that there's a place and a reason for both of them. So maybe trying to find a way to lean towards each one. And again, questions passed on to you about that. But mostly the major thing we talked about was if they're gonna do community solar, how to make it accessible for the low income families also.
Great, thank you, Samantha. And Wendy.
Hi. So I feel like our group was really great because we had a bunch of different people. We had private citizens, we had a fellow from CMP, we had a woman from Rockland's Energy Municipality who had some really great things to add. But it seems very apparent that each group and where they're coming from is affecting what aspect of the energy change they're interested in, be it financial, environmental, or social. And one woman from MDI pointed out that they have a huge influx of people coming in every summer. They have people that are going there for retirement, maybe moving on, and just kind of just enjoying Maine as the beautiful vacation land we're known for. So that weighs into how they would want to approach solar because of the cost that they maybe won't be able to benefit from as somebody who comes here seasonally.
Great, thank you, Wendy. I think that reaches all of my students. Did I miss anybody? Any group that wasn't represented? Okay. Thank you so much to the students for facilitating and taking notes and giving such good summaries. And thank you all for coming. If anybody does want to stick around and ask a couple of questions, I'm happy to answer them. But thank you very much.